Okay, it shows live. It's just loading. Just give it 1 second. All right. It looks like we're live.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is the October 22nd, 2020 Zoning Board of Appeals hearing for the City of Rochester. This begins the pre-meeting. The pre-meeting is a time where board members and staff go over applications. There is no participation by the public or applicants at this time. Following the pre-meeting, starting right at 6 p.m., we will begin the public hearing, and then immediately following that will be the deliberations. So right now we're going to jump into the cases, starting with case number 1, which is a return case from last month. The case is 33-35 Flower City Park. The board members had asked for, voted to hold, and they asked for additional information, including a site plan, some more information on refuse and recycling storage, potential asphalt removal. And what is contained in the packets that you have in front of you is what the applicant provided in response to what the board members requested. Does anyone have any questions on this one? And the whole letter.
Matt, I'm just curious if the two new members have reviewed this case.
Yes.
Yes. You heard the testimony from the last meeting.
Yeah, I watched it.
Okay.
And just to remind you both, and Matt may have said this, but at the beginning of each of the two of that hearing, if you could state that for the record that you reviewed the recording of the case and that you familiarized yourself sufficiently to be able to vote on it. If you could just state that for the record.
Okay.
And Matt, one follow-up question.
Mm-hmm.
There was an opposition letter, at least one last time. Are you going to have to read that into the record again this time?
I'm not, because the case is still open, but that letter, any previous public testimony is still part of the case. I don't need to read it in again, and I have not received anything for this go around in response to this advertising.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, so any previous submitted materials, the testimony that or the feedback that was read into the record last time, that's all still can be considered as part of the application. Any other questions on Flower City Park?
I have a question, and it's about the garage. I know that someone asked in the recording about using the garage, and the gentleman said no, and he said something about a tree, but it didn't really seem to answer the question for me about why they weren't using the garage for parking. And I don't know if I missed something about the tree or if there's something that I don't know.
I'm going to answer, and then if anyone wants to respond to that, it's a good question because the question did come up, why is he not using the garage? So you're trying to expand the parking. The city only allows you to cover up to 50% of your lot with, impermeable surfaces. So why is the garage not being used to make up for that? And does anyone remember what was discussed with the tree? If not, Holly, I would definitely advise you to ask that question tonight.
I remember a couple of things. I remember asking if the garage doors were operational and could cars be stored in there. From what I recall from a little over a month ago, he said, yeah, they are operational. He stores materials in there and not cars. As far as the trees go, there are some cut up trees on the east side of the property. And I had asked him if those were going to go away or if they were just going to lay there for a few months. He said they're going to be moved. So the trees that I'm remembering are the ones that were laying on the ground that were cut down.
So not related to the garage.
Correct.
Okay.
What I remember is that there was a tree behind the garage that was basically uprooting it, and there were some structural issues. That's why he can't put vehicles in there. So it's really not operational for vehicles. And I remember I think we had that discussion in deliberations, and we kind of clarified what he meant in terms of that. But he did give a reason in terms of that there's some structural issues. But I think if you want to, it'd be good if you want to ask the question and get clarification on it. But there were some structural issues because we were just saying, there's 2 spots right here that folks can use. And he did mention that. And I think he mentioned that there was, it's pretty expensive to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else on Flower City Park? Case number 297 Wilder Terrace. Proposal is to demolish an existing garage to replace it with a garage that exceeds the lot coverage requirement. Any questions on this one? Case number 3. And Matt, I know you emailed me about recusing yourself on this. Thank you for letting us know. So during the hearing, what we'll have you do is just make a statement that you'll be recusing yourself from the case when we actually have the hearing. Case number 3 is part of a much larger development north of West Ridge Road, east of or near Dewey Avenue. There's a ton of new housing, mix of multifamily as well as some single family housing, and the establishment of a daycare center, which is within the proximity of a sexually oriented business. Any questions on this one?
I do.
Mhm.
I have a question.
Mhm.
So so the city has set that as a minimum, correct? 1,000 feet?
Yeah, the current zoning code says that, correct?
All right. So, and then we're saying approximately do we know exactly? I mean, how many feet? So
That number is what you'd use.
550?
Yeah, correct. That's the measurement.
Okay. All right. And is he aware of this? Are they aware of this? The Passstone people?
Correct. That's why they're here. They need to make the case that proximity does not, present any issues or detriment to anybody or anything. So they'll be making that case during their.
Is it okay? So that's their focus tonight. Is that
correct? Just that distance separation.
right?
Correct.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Matt, I have a question on this. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
I was familiar with it being built earlier, and they have children living in this complex. Don't they have families living in this complex with children?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, there's a lot of different housing.
But if they have kids already there, shouldn't that just wipe out this distancing?
Because the
Speak up,
code
David.
doesn't-
I can't hear you, David.
I got a bad throat, man.
Oh, now you got a sore throat. Oh, man.
You're here for me later, Terry.
You know, this code requirement, was initially thought of to prevent these adult uses from locating next to some of these sensitive uses, whether it's a church or a school or a daycare center. This is sort of a reverse situation where the adult use is already there. And so, they've concluded that this is not a risk to them. And I think David points out that this is a residential development likely with children in it already. So, it's a little, it doesn't quite fit. So what the intent of that distance restriction was, but if they can just sort of address, and you can ask them if they don't do it clearly, whether they think there will be any impact from having this adult use near them and why it will not. So I don't think they addressed it real clearly in their application. So you might want to ask them some questions about that, but it is, it was a requirement to protect sensitive uses. It doesn't quite work when that adult use was already there. So
can somebody make a case against that then? So what's the point?
Yeah.
As I said, it was originally to prevent the adult uses from locating near sensitive uses. When the adult use is there first, I think you have to decide, the applicant concluded that this was not a problematic location for this childcare center. So you could ask them about that, but they've made the determination. It's not like they were there first and an adult use plopped down the street from them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, they're on different frontages. They're they're still a fair distance apart with big parking lots between. It's not likely that there will be any interaction with, the populations from the two facilities. So you can just ask them about that.
I have a question about the no other means feasible section. And obviously I'm new, so I don't have any idea if this is relevant or not. But it just sort of says that it's vacant and there's been limited interest, so let's make it a daycare. Is that really demonstrating why it has to be a daycare versus anything else?
Oh, sorry, I thought Joanna was gonna say something.
Well,
No, so what, it's a good question. So what you'll want the applicant to address during the hearing, no other remedy. So first, there'll be a stated benefit to the applicant. And I think the benefit is also probably to the community for having a daycare center on site and, with all of that, I don't know how many units is. I assume it's several hundred additional units in the area between the apartments and the single family dwellings. So what they need to do is establish that there is no other remedy. There's no other means feasible within the code. And maybe that looks like there's no other even location within their development to put this daycare center. So this daycare center is, 550 feet from the sexually oriented business. Maybe they explored putting it further away from the sexually oriented business on their site, but there's no other commercial area on the site that they can do that. So what the applicant will need to do is discuss how they arrived at this location and why they couldn't achieve the same outcome by locating it somewhere else.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. What it seems like is that these guys, they could have just put this thing on the opposite side of the development during the site plan process. So it looks like it was just a mistake on their end on checking what businesses were located within that proximity of West Ridge Road. So, because I think it was always planned when they first brought this forward, always planned to be I put a daycare there from my understanding of the project.
Yeah, good information.
I have a question. Does the hours of operation have any impact? Does it matter at all?
Hours of operation for which business?
For either business. If the hours aren't at the same time, does it matter that that's what the use is?
That's a good question.
You could weigh that in. If you can get that information, that might be something to weigh in, whether there's actually an impact from being in some proximity.
Like if the times don't line up. Yeah, absolutely.
I would think that would be a big point on their part if they are presenting, that in defense of what they're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because I think the other business is actually closed right now, Cora. I don't know why I know that, but it's closed right now.
You heard.
And I think it has a nighttime use to it. That's what I heard. David told me that before when we were talking.
Does anybody know what type of place it is? Is it a strip joint? I think
what I said. I think Lorraine is a nighttime joint. You know what I mean? Nighttime joint.
Okay.
Anything else on the daycare center case 3? All right, and then the last case.
Before you go on, one more thing to consider. Again, I recognize that I don't have a vote in this, but is there a line of sight? Because I know that the structure is built pretty much internally faced. So is there actual line of sight from the daycare where they're intending to place it in that particular adult facility?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, is there some sort of a physical barrier, or is there line of sight, or is there, is the kind of two separate the parking lots behind the buildings on West Ridge Road and then the parking lots for this development, can you even cross between them? Yeah, all of those things are good questions.
Yeah, I think Matt and I were looking at the aerials and trying to figure out, it looked like there was a fence between
the two parking lots.
Adjoining parking lots. You might inquire about that.
According to the website of said business, the earliest they open is 7 p.m., which is on Saturdays. And the rest of the week they open it.
I'm sorry, I got to.
You're good.
I wasn't even going to go there.
I had to know.
All
Doing,
right.
doing the proper research.
Next time, we just ask David those questions. Holly. We just ask David those questions. No, David a church man. I'm just playing. David's a man of church. I knew.
I used to have a bar across the street from me.
I know you. You used to.
Years ago.
You know
That was
your
about 20 years ago now.
Anything else on that one?
One, right?
Okay, and then the last case is 197 Driving Park. So this is on the corner of Tacoma, I believe is the cross street. So this property here, I included some of the previous permit history on here, just so you could see it has a bit of a history of changing uses relative to the number of units within the dwelling. Property has been vacant now for quite some time. My suggestion to you all would be to speak with the owner about that extended period of vacancy and find out what's going on there. Because it is sort of a substantial amount of vacancy. So that's definitely one of the things that speaks to the standards about, how has this vacancy occurred and why has this happened? So looking to reestablish as a 4-family. Any questions on this one?
Matt, do you know if it's the same owner?
I believe it is, but I would definitely clarify. Check with the applicant when he purchased the property.
Yeah, the paperwork says 2005.
Then he purchased it?
He purchased it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's to them. They've had it since 05.
Oh,
Yeah. That's fine.
Matt, I had one question, and the LLC had it. They purchased it in 05. I was looking through. Just tell me what page, because I understand the cost. What is the cost to the applicant? I didn't see to reestablish it as a 4-family. What's that current cost? I get the profit loss.
It's on his, yeah, no, give me 1 second. I believe it's on the, you're gonna see me frantically flipping through papers here. Give me 1 second. Okay, on attachment, the top of the page says in quotes, attachment number 7, property located. It's the third to last sheet in the staff report.
mhm.
It says 4-unit residential. So within the current configuration, and you can clarify this with the applicant, I believe the applicant is saying to continue to operate it as a 4-family. Oh, I see what you're saying. That's what the profit loss. You're saying what work needs to go into it?
Yeah, because he's telling me it's costing, plus or minus 52 grand to convert it to a single family home. I get that. And then he goes into attachment 8 saying that they've put 33K into it since they purchased it, but they purchased it from, if this information is correct, in 2005. So it's kind of different than some of the applications we've seen where some of these, have come before us and it's
Quick turnaround.
new owners of the property. So I'll ask the question though. I'll ask the question.
No, you're right, because usually it's like, I just bought it or I've owned it for less than a year.
Right, yeah.
Is there, and again, I'm sorry if this is not a relevant question, and I will stop saying that after this question. So the only information that he's giving us is to convert from its current situation to a single family. Aren't there other options that he's not talking about that would make sense for the neighborhood?
So, no, it is a relevant question. So the board has the ability to approve, as you know, on condition of something or with lesser relief. And lesser relief is getting something, not what you came for, but not back down to square one. So because he's trying to reestablish as a 4 and not a 2, there are a number of dwelling units within, between the 1 and 4. The questions around that are typically related to what the cost would be to deconvert it to that number of units. Right. And a lot of times the cost is related to actually changing the structure and how it's currently laid out. So, it may be cost prohibitive, but that's on the applicant to prove that case that to even deconvert it to a 3-family, say, would be cost prohibitive because this wall needs to be moved, that wall needs to be moved or something like that. But that's on the applicant to prove that case.
Do we have any comparable homes in that area that are 4-unit? I know that one of the neighboring structures is a double, but do we have any 4 units in that area, that general area?
Yeah, it's a good question. He didn't submit anything as part of his application to say, look, you know, the character of the area is sort of driven by these 4-unit multifamily dwellings sort of thing. He did not submit anything like that. You could certainly ask him during the hearing. I think it's a great question to say, hey, look, you know, you're trying to retain rights as a 4. What's the rest of the area look like? What's actually out there?
I know directly across the street, there's a blue structure that's 4-family.
You
And
have
then
several,
There's one answer.
you have several over there in that area.
Yeah, it's tons of different multifamilies, 2, 3, 4 families.
Yeah. Got it.
Anything else on 197 Driving Park? All right, great. Good discussion. All right, thank you all. So what we will do here, we will break for, looks like 18 minutes. You can turn your mics and video off. Chris, you can stop the stream for a moment.
Yeah.